Will you tell me when? Good. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abby Yeoman, Assistant City and County Manager for Broomfield. So I always giggle a little bit when they give somebody with the last name of Yeoman a microphone, because usually I don't need one at all. So welcome and thanks for joining us today. So this is the second of our 3 public forums today, and today's presentation will be presented by Economic Vitality and Development, our department, led by Jeff Romine, Director of Development Finance and our economist. And then along with Matt Brandon, Business Development Officer, and Jeff Schreier, Business Development Lead. So over the past 18 months, Broomfield has fundamentally shifted how we approach development within our 33.6 square miles. Key changes include the deployment of a development matrix team, which is really a cool approach to ensure some collaboration and comprehensive conversations are happening regarding development. So the staff that consists of our matrix team includes economic vitality, finance, planning and engineering, as well as our city attorney's office. Additionally, we bifurcated over the last 18 months our planning and zoning commission into 2 boards, land use review commission and neighborhood board of adjustment. And again, this is in order to streamline our review. We've got a lot of development happening in Broomfield. And finally, over the last 18 months, we have worked to solidify the talent on our economic vitality team, which is represented really well in this room right now. It was critical to ensure we had resources available for our small business owners, as well as the chaser, as we call Matt, who is focused on the what's next. So I know Jeff and Matt have been doing a lot of work to make sure that we're taking care of our businesses that already exist, focusing on retention, and then also chasing the what's next for Broomfield in our 33.6 apparently square miles. We continue to utilize our new development matrix as Broomfield moves towards build out to ensure we are mindful about what goes where as we continue to build for our future. Before we begin, I just want to remind everyone that the presentation is being recorded, so we will have microphones when you ask questions or if you have questions later on. And you're obviously welcome to ask any questions that you would like to ask today. And if you're like me, sometimes I walk out of the meeting and realize that I had a question and forgot to ask it. So folks are welcome to email cmocrew@broomfield.org. I'll say that one more time, cmocrew@broomfield.org if you have questions after the session concludes. Just another quick reminder that we'll have the community development presentation on Wednesday at the same time, 3 p.m. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jeff, who has promised us not only a ton of great information, but also some jokes along with it. Jeff?
Thank you. Thanks, Abby, and council candidates, as well as others who may be watching this presentation. Thank you for having us today. The presentation will roughly take about 30 to 40 minutes is what our estimation is, so there's plenty of time. If you would like those in attendance, if you'd like to interrupt at any point to ask a question, please feel free to do so. We do have microphones here. Or we can have a more complete conversation at the end also. I have to click this. So real briefly, as you just go through it, you'll see we're going to talk a little bit about community economic vitality. It's a little bit weird to talk about economic vitality in its just narrow sense because it is more than economic development, it's more than business development. It includes the other aspects of the way that we brought the work together. The idea is to be more comprehensive and collaborative, both within this team, but also more holistically within the city. So what you're going to hear today is a discussion on business development and our activities there, housing development, catalytic projects, and then also economics and finance. So we really have 4 key parts of this team now, as it's been formulated over the last 1.5 to 2 years. They fit together as long, and I didn't put language into each of the other circles, as you can see in this next slide. But as you look at that slide, you can imagine Department of Finance, Community Development and Planning, the library as an example, the Broomfield Library, and then also thinking about our outside partners. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward through the presentation, because we have a number of key partners that actually help us deliver. Most importantly, in every one of the cases that we're talking about, it's the private sector is our true partner because we're not creating jobs, we're not creating businesses, individuals are doing that through their own activities. What we're trying to do is encourage them and support them in those activities. And that's true whether we're talking about a private development on the housing side, or a small business getting started, or a large business deciding to come here. So in all cases, our primary partner oftentimes is the private sector and is the community as a whole. And so while we're a very small team, think of it as thousands of people all working to build Broomfield's economy and building Broomfield's opportunity for housing. So that's when we talk about the collaborative and integrated approach. It really is this holistic activity that's going on. And so therefore, oftentimes, the way we try to do our work is very much out in the community, perhaps not in large meetings, but in lots of individual conversations. And so that's what Matt and Jeff have really been doing over the last few months since they joined the team, and I've tried to do over the last 2 years since I came here. Additionally, we're very priority focused, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. But what we're trying to do is respond to what the community has voiced as an issue or opportunities, as well as City Council directly. And so we'll talk through that. And then finally, the what and who, and I've already mentioned the private sector, but we'll talk about some of our other partners. And the what is trying to create opportunity. We're trying to create those types of places where people can locate, where they can grow their family, build their career. That's what Broomfield has historically been about, is a place where people have chosen to move here and to put down roots. And that's really what the strength of this community has been for the last 30 years plus. And we want to encourage that and continue to do that, whether it be your first business or your fifth, whether it be your first home or your third home as you're moving through your life. The council priorities are pretty explicit. Many of you have seen these, and we report on them once a quarter, but it's something that the council identifies. Generally, council will identify them at least once during their 2-year term. So oftentimes we like to have some stability to them, not moving them back and forth, but to be able to kind of work on them, because many of these things that are identified as council priorities are not something that can be accomplished in 3 or 6 months. They take years, and quite frankly, multiple terms of council and multiple terms of staff. And so we all kind of join in on that. We want to show measurable progress, but not necessarily, it's not that we don't want to accomplish them, we clearly do, but they are bigger. It's the whole idea of a council priority. At the same time, roughly every 2 years, we do a community survey in this here, where we ask residents. This year was a pretty robust survey. We intentionally went out, try to get a higher level of response. And you can read that survey. It talks about the response rates and the various methodologies. But these are the items that are the top items that were identified by the residents of Broomfield through that survey. And this is the percentage that they had identified as their top concerns. So as you can see, affordable housing, then economic development / encouraging business. I've shortened them in order to fit them on the slide. Sustainable environmental policy, you ask, why would that be necessarily in this group? Because virtually everything we're doing, we're trying to encourage that sustainability. So through the housing development, working with our businesses, we really want that to become part of the vision and the foundation of the community as expressed by the residents. The right kind of growth. And so this is a really nuanced way of answering this question the community came forward with. Shopping and dining options, the Broomfield Town Square, we'll refer to as BTS. And then how do we redevelop, or some areas that have seen some deterioration or some capital movement out. So those are the key priorities. I'm not going to go through and read the mission statement because we've broadened a little bit to incorporate some of the other items. The key thing here is literally in this room, we came up with the idea of Broomfield is inclusive, thriving, and sustaining, otherwise known as It's Broomfield. It's a very simple way of thinking about it, but those are the 3 key words become very important to what we're trying to create as a community. On the right side of this slide, which you'll note is it brings together these items that we just talked about. Also, just for your information, those who've been watching some of the staffing and more importantly, some of the recent presentations, we currently have 2+1 vacancies. And the why I'm being nuanced in that is there was another position in the economic vitality team. There's also the Hope Housing Program Manager position, which is currently vacant. Cheryl Sinclair, who I believe is watching this at home, and will respond to questions if they're written, so that we can get you more complete answers if I can't answer them. Retired from the community or from her staff service here a few months ago. She's working as a consultant to us right now. And we hope to fill her position sometime later this fall or early next year. And then there's something that the concept that's going through the city council is how to adjust the Broomfield Housing Authority. And there is a Broomfield Housing Authority. Let me be very clear about that. There is such a thing as the Broomfield Housing Authority. It has been operating for a number of years here. It is, though, the council and the Broomfield Housing Authority are the same folks. And so they are literally the same board. And you will hear, whenever you hear a council agenda where we'll call up the other board, it's the same representation. What is being proposed to city council right now is for an independent board to be appointed. And I'll talk about that briefly when we get into the housing section. And so that organization will continue to operate. It will just no longer be, if the proposal moves through city council, it will no longer be the same 11 folks. And so that's that evolutionary change. Key partners: Broomfield Chamber, the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation, North Denver SBDC, and then the myriad of housing organizations that we work with within Adams County and Boulder, as well as the state and federal levels. So we work with HUD as an example. We work with the state of Colorado Department of Housing and an organization called the Colorado Housing Finance Authority, CHAPA, which is oftentimes the people that fund much of the affordable housing in most communities. Yes, Jake's going to give you that.
Sorry, can you just define SBDC?
Oh, sorry. And if I ever do that, just shake your fist. I'm just kidding. Small Business Development Center. It's a network. It's nationally funded and state funded. It's a network, and our local, the one that serves our local community is actually out of the Front Range Community College. So we work with them. We provide them a small amount of funding that matches up with some of the state funding and other dollars, and they provide small business support directly to our businesses, as well as what I refer to as business charities. And those are people that are thinking about starting. Okay. And then finally, the other thing I always want to point out is, as mentioned, we have so much of our work is done through various partnerships, and so therefore it really is marketing efforts and communications. Really a lot of what we do, but we also do it in a very mindful way. We have a key partner within the city that works with us. We work on the messaging side and kind of the content. They tell us how to say it better. And you will tell by this presentation that they didn't necessarily help me on this presentation. So if there's any errors, that is not on them. That is purely my fault. Moving forward then, the community support is critical. And as I mentioned, it's already, as we serve as the primary link from the city and county of Broomfield to our businesses. And so it is our primary job. We also, just so that you all know, we do work and have a contract with the Broomfield Chamber. We are both a member, and we also have a contract with them, and that contract services is to also improve our outreach to small businesses. So we work directly with them so that we have multiple vehicles to get to our small businesses. Our feeling is, and all businesses, I shouldn't just say small, but our feeling is the more you can talk to somebody, the better the communication is and the stronger it is in both directions. And we've really benefited from that relationship over the years. As you can see, I'm not going to read through these slides, but as you can see, we also provide direct financial support. We did that this past year through our Enhancement program, as well as the state-funded small business relief program. That was funded by the state legislature late in 2020. And then we utilized those funds in 2021 and provided small business grants to various businesses that were primarily hard hit by COVID and the economic outcomes of that. We also did outreach, emails, town halls, and many of other things to talk to our businesses over this past year and to have a true dialogue. You can see the types of work we're doing around housing. It includes home repair. Think of home repair program that we're using HUD, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development dollars. We do those to help people when they have an emergency need for their home. Say, as an example, their furnace goes out in the dead of winter, and they are income restricted, perhaps. And that's a way to keep people in their homes. So the idea is the best way to address any type of housing vacancy is to actually try to go to the root level. And so we'll go in with those types of programs. They're somewhat limited, but they've been very effective in keeping seniors as well as moderate income individuals in homes here in Broomfield. As they continue to move forward, we also invest in new housing development and making sure that what we're trying to do is work across the spectrum, because again, as I mentioned, oftentimes people start off with different needs and then they mature up through their careers and oftentimes then become long-term residents of the community. If we can get people started in the community and building their foundations, it's really important. And it's also really important for our businesses because oftentimes it's very difficult. So if you think about where moderate income individuals can live, it's oftentimes far east of here. And so they're driving past job after job after job to come to their job here. We want to make sure that it can be a fulfilling opportunity for them and that they can also create the future that we think Broomfield represents to many people. While we're doing that work, which is primarily externally focused, we also are providing support to various departments within the city and county, and we're doing that through a number of things. One of our key partnerships is with the workforce program, and that is done through our human services department. They are funded both by the state and the federal government, but we work very directly with them to put them in contact with businesses. The strength of a workforce program is through the job opportunities. But think about it from the other side. The strength also comes from the businesses who are seeking additional employees that are well qualified and trained. If we can make them more successful, they're going to continue to invest and grow in Broomfield also. So it's a two-sided coin.
How many businesses, I know when I was growing up, that a lot of businesses train their employees. How much of that goes on now? Is that really lacking because more people go to college, or can you put any numbers on that?
I don't have specific numbers. We can talk to Chris, who is the head of that, Chris Dewhurst, and he can provide us perhaps some. There are a number of businesses still provide on-the-job training, and we actually they have programs in there to support those businesses to provide that on-the-job training, as does Front Range Community College. So both those programs exist. But at the same time, sometimes firms need to have certain credentials or certain other things that they don't have the capability to teach in-house. And so that's where, as an example, our workforce program can come in handy and provide those credentials. And there's different ways to do that. On the other side of it, though, we have residents who, quite frankly, don't have the whole skill set necessarily. Sometimes it's nothing more than traditional just job behavior skills. But oftentimes here, at least in Broomfield, it tends to be more technical skills that are needed in demand. So it could be both sides of it. It could be the soft skills or the hard skills, but nevertheless, both of those are provided through that program. In addition, then the other thing is Assistant City Manager, City County Manager, Nolan pointed out, we have a matrix team. And that matrix team is doing lots of different work. It's across the range. Carl Front, who's here, is also part of that team in the city attorney's office. And we work very collaboratively together to make sure that key projects are moved forward. And I'll talk about that briefly within the presentation. And then the last thing, and again, I'm not reading the whole slide, but the last thing I just point out is the long-range financial plan. You'll hear this talked about time and time again within the community. This is a unique part of what makes Broomfield different. And that is we think about the long-term consequences of development at the same time we think about the short-term. And that is something very unusual. So we very much link development decisions to the long-range consequence on our fiscal abilities, our financial abilities. And that is something that we're constantly updating and doing on a more regular basis, not just by the project, but also the kind of technology, not technology, but the underlying assumptions and structure of that model to make sure that it works and represents effectively what's going on. I'm going to introduce my friend Matt to come up, just because I figured you all want to take a break from me for a few minutes. Matt's going to cover the next 3 slides, and then Jeff will come up right after.
Thank you, Jeff, and yeah, nice to meet you all. My name is Matt Brandon. I'm the Business Development Officer for St. Henry Broomfield. So my focus, and what I'll be doing in the next couple of minutes is just describing my position, what I'm focused on for the economic vitality team, and also what I'm not focused on that others will be covering. What I do, I'm basically the chaser that Jeff described. So the primary goal for me is to attract new business to Broomfield. The smart way to do that is to leverage what's already here. So there is a focus on retention and expansion. So that way we can find businesses that are complementary to those and good for the community and that are good corporate citizens as well. So what I do is focus on more like corporate types of employment, things like office technology, manufacturing, those types of positions, retail, smaller business, and other types of businesses covered mostly by Jeff here for short. So recent wins, we are in a very fortunate position in Broomfield. So we have the Cross Headquarters Partners Group built a wonderful U.S. headquarters over in Interlochen. All aerospace continues to grow here. In Colorado alone, we heard from them today, they have just under 2 million square feet, about 25% of which is in Broomfield. And they're continuing to expand here in Broomfield. They want to invest here. They're excited about it. So yeah, and I believe they have just over 800 employees. So companies like that are who we are trying to bring to Broomfield and help them continue to grow. My job sometimes feels a little bit like a sales job in that I have a pipeline. There's companies who are considering Broomfield, and of those, this slide points out there are about 8 really active prospects. I'd say in total, I have just over 20 companies that have some degree of confidence that they are looking at Broomfield. 8 of those we feel really good about, and they match the profile that I'll show you on the next page. So the way that I do my job, just to put a bow on it, is a mix of reaching out to existing businesses that are already in Broomfield, kind of this core that you'll see on the next slide, as well as leveraging our partners, the Metro Denver Economic Development Council, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, even the Chamber and smaller business groups, really anybody with a vested interest in helping Broomfield grow. That's who I work with to complete my job. I don't think most of the names on here are anything new to people in this room, but I did want to show the slide just because this informs how I do my job. I'm not trying to attract any business with a big checkbook and promises a big job, lots of jobs. The companies that we're fortunate enough to have in Broomfield look like this. This is a very impressive set of businesses for any community of any size. So the ones that will continue to come to Broomfield will look like this and be in support of companies on this slide. So on this slide, it basically just talks about the expansion side of my position, which what I do from an expansion perspective is basically reaching out to the core, the critical employers here in Broomfield, finding out, what do they need to continue to grow here? How do we make sure that they're happy, that they don't consider leaving, that they consider adding additional business units? And what are the social and community factors that are important to them, and how can we collaborate with them on those issues? So speaking of all, again, we had another call with them today where we talked about just these things. Companies like that, part of the reason they're really important to bring to Broomfield and to focus on them is because they'll support the community initiatives that we care so much about. Ball is a really big champion for sustainability, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they're very upfront that they want to invest in those initiatives. So they told me, call on us. We want to work with you on those types of initiatives. So that's a big reason why I enjoy doing this. So, and then we also talked to them about, what are the roadblocks they see in their future? Findings and concerns, things like, what does the return to office look like? How much of their office space are they going to use the way that they used it before? And how can we help them think creatively about, effective ways to use it in the future? So, yeah, and then there's all kinds of issues they bring up that I would have never imagined, but we work with them on anything they bring up. And as Jeff mentioned, I focus on the future. So there's a lot of exciting development happening in Brookfield, and we're developing marketing around it. There's a lot of exciting things already in place for that. The US 36 corridor continues to be a big focus for primary employment. We've identified that there's been $250 million in federal investment into R&D, technology, and those types of companies, primarily in aerospace, defense, energy, and space. So what that means is, and that's just in small business, that doesn't include the large, all aerospaces of the world. So that $250 million going into the US 36 corridor means that Brookfield is at the heart of a region that is really attractive to those kinds of employees. So we have a lot that we can capitalize on. These developments that we're working on are going to pay off in a big way for economic development vitality. So that lower left image is just basically a representation of what future developments could look like in that area. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that. And oops, I'm trying to go back. I don't know why this is. Someone help me out. Is there? Well, anyway, thank you all. That's my portion. And apparently the entire presentation, we're just no, thank you very much. Look forward to answering questions.
This button here.
Apparently there's left and right.
Yeah, so it doesn't.
They just threw me in with. Here's the clicker.
All right, hello again. I'm Jeff Schreier, Business Development Lead here with the City and County of Brookfield. So my duties revolve mostly around small business, retail, that retention work. So one of the ways that we do that is through business outreach and support. So since I came here, one of the things that I've started doing is doing a robust business campaign to check in, listen, and talk to the businesses and thank them for being here. But trying to figure out, what's their business health? Are they doing well? What are the staffing issues that they may be having? Just any other difficulties they may be running into. Within the first couple of weeks of doing these visits, I started to bring somebody from the Workforce Development Center with me, because what I was running into was a lot of businesses are having a hard time finding staffing. So really wanted to collaborate with them as we're going around, so that we can have really fruitful conversations with these local businesses and make sure that they're getting the assistance that they need, and showing them the different suite of programs and offerings that we have that can use to help their business grow and thrive. An important part of this too is that being able to go there in person and be able to update all of our records that we have, so that we have the most up-to-date records possible, so that we're going out and contacting them, we're contacting the right folks, we have a generally good sense of where these businesses are and how they're doing. Yes.
Sorry. What kind of things do you keep track of? What do you, like number of employees or types of employees? What do you update?
Yeah, so our records were pretty bare in a lot of ways. So we're just trying to, even the basics, like a lot of things on Google and other places are incorrect. So just making sure that we have the correct business in the correct place. Getting a general sense of the number of employees that they have, best contacts, reaching out to them, just even recording our outreach to them, because we don't want to inundate them with different departments going to them constantly. We want to make sure that we have an effective. So another piece of that outreach is we're going through refresh of the economic vitality website and how we're communicating with folks. We know that a lot of businesses that I've reached out to, their main way of getting their information is through Facebook or websites. So we're making sure that we're communicating with our different types of audiences correctly and getting them the information they need in a efficient, effective way. And one of the other pieces of keeping up to date records is that down the line we'll be able to create a really solid customer guide, which is a business list, so that we can make that public, make sure that the public is able to support local businesses, in a strong fashion. And we're just trying to identify program and support gaps and work to meet those needs through partner programs and services, workforce or the SPDC, making sure that people get what they need. We're meeting with those entrepreneurs and the business curious. Again, working with the Small Business Development Center next month. I'll be they're holding a 9-month class, and next month I'll be talking with all the businesses in that class that are from Broomfield, so that they know early on they have a liaison that they can come to, that they can work with. They're either starting their business or looking to grow, and those sorts of aspects. Down here is the creative economy. I don't think we've defined creative economy, so just in case, creative economy is basically an economy based on creating value out of imaginative qualities instead of your traditional land, labor, capital. So people involved in arts and things like that. That's creative economy. That's a big priority for the city and county of Broomfield. So we want to make sure that we're preparing a directory, kind of like the artery that Broomfield has already done with the trail, and map of creative local businesses so that the folks in Broomfield know where those are. We want to solicit and support local authentic retailers and restaurants looking to start or expand in the community. And we want to support local creative businesses and organizations and encourage cross support of creative enterprises. Next piece is our retail strategic work. So, I'll be really taking on retail head on. I'll be working with our retail consultant that we currently have on these 3 primary things. 1, knowledge transfer and education. We want to make sure that I and the other staff understand Broomfield's retail market and how the city can be more effective in the attraction and retention of retail businesses. 2, we want to do a corridor analysis. So we want to look at 3 to 4 select areas within Broomfield and see what we can do to prioritize that investment and attraction to those areas. We want to see what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, where are our opportunities for really doing something in these corridors that can be special and really develop those in a smart way into the future. And this involves working with community development and planning and our other internal and external partners. We're not siloed off. We're making sure we're working with everybody as much as we can. So we're thinking about all the different aspects that go into redeveloping or developing the area. And finally, based on off the things that we've gotten from the first 2 pieces of this, we want to determine opportunities for improvement of those selected corridors from a physical and retailer perspective. Once we've done that, we can identify the appropriate retail uses for the site and define a better timeline for when those changes can happen. And once we've done that, we can conduct an active outreach to retail prospects, work on recruitment and bring those people in and get that development moving. So lastly.
Hey, Jeff, can I just have you define SWOT?
Oh, yeah. That's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and I think it's threats, right? Then one of the other things I've been taking over in my time here and learning on is our Enhanced Broomfield grant. And just to give you an update on that, it's a grant that we've had through COVID, and that's what we've been using it during the COVID times is to help sustain businesses. So our COVID grants have helped 130 businesses with over $1 million in funding to sustain them during that time. And now that we're not necessarily exiting COVID, but we're looking at a different way to help these businesses. So we're looking at how do we pivot that from sustaining into helping these businesses to expansion and grow themselves so that we're hiring more people, getting those businesses to grow past what they were doing during the pandemic, even prior to the pandemic. Lastly, we're looking towards the holiday season. So I've been working with our partners at the Chamber and talking with the communications group and others to try and figure out what's a good campaign that we can undertake for the local, for the holiday season so that we can get people shopping locally. I'm very excited for that personally. Hopefully it's something really great as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
Part of what you were talking about reminded me of the conversations around the town center and the redevelopment of the mall and this transitional kind of existence that we have coming out of COVID. Are you really partnered up with the folks that are looking at what it is that makes sense in those specifically, or?
So I think on that one, I'll probably let Jeff.
Okay.
Let Jeff.
And you're 4 slides ahead of us.
Oh, okay, thanks.
So if it's okay,
I'm happy to wait.
is that okay if I pause and get to that?
I just wanted to make sure that I understand that.
Absolutely.
Section.
So thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Matt. So again, another part of our organization and what we're trying to focus on is affordable housing. Attainable housing is another way that some people talk about it. Some people use the word workforce housing. All of those are fine, and really what we're trying to do is think about the type of housing that our various employees of our businesses may need or want, as well as for other residents. So even when we think about the full spectrum of life cycle around housing, it includes people who are retired. It includes people who are shrinking, lowering their square footage in their home in order to be able to stay in the community that they've grown and created and loved. So real briefly, we think about it as in the sense of creating additional housing opportunities. This community has grown significantly. We have not been able to keep up, as most communities have across the state of Colorado, across the nation, for that matter, been able to keep up with the full range of housing. And so it's actually, in many of the conversations I've had over the last decade or so, and I'm sure this is true for Matt's conversations too, one of the first questions we oftentimes get is can my employees live in that community? And it becomes critically important for the economic strength and health of the community. We can talk about how the community can help provide that workforce. Firms now are not moving because of tax breaks or cheap land or something else like that. They're oftentimes moving to where the workforce is that they want to attract. And so it becomes critically important that we think about housing as being part of economic vitality and development, not a separate thing over here. So that's part of the reason why City and County Manager Hoffman brought that into this group is to make sure that we're thinking about arguably both sides of the coin at the same time, making sure we understand that. Because that'll put us in a more competitive situation. I already mentioned the single family home repairs as well as some other programs that we have, and we are providing those directly. Also thinking about how to be creative. And so the ADU ideal is one example of that creativity. There are other things that we recognize we may be able to seek opportunities for as we look forward to trying to solve some of these issues that are thorny and difficult and very costly at sometimes. But thinking about it rather than saying there's only one solution, just as if there is not just one problem. And so it's not just build your way out of it, it's thinking it through completely and making sure that we're thinking about the complete set of opportunities and challenges. Housing, through our work and through the work of the Bloomfield Housing Authority, we think about creating options for those that have the fewest options. This isn't about creating a home, figuring out how to create homes for people that are making $1 million a year. They have lots of options. It's thinking about it in a holistic sense and trying to bring that through and doing it in a meaningful way. And what I mean by that is both the quantity that we need to probably achieve, but also thinking about the efficacy of it. So you'll hear us talk a little bit about efficiency and effectiveness and figuring out where the risk falls. And understanding that, because that's really what a partner does, is they understand each other, not just what our role can be. And then obviously the other part of our housing work is about communicating the ideas. Here's just a quick couple of key points on our accomplishments over the last 2 years and where we are. There's a full list in a presentation we gave roughly a month or a week ago or two that has a list of all the projects we've been working on over the last few years. And we can get that to you. That's also available on the City Council website under the inclusionary housing, under the Independent Housing Authority presentation that was given. But this just gives you a quick snapshot. And as you can see, at this point, we've, in 2021, worked to create, not necessarily open, but create the opportunities for 1,259 additional units. Some of those will be coming forward in a year, some will be several years out, but nevertheless, working to try to meet those demands and needs in the future. Also, we expect to get about $5.8 million in cash in lieu from development that's coming forward that may not be building units in their particular development, but providing the cash in lieu payment to the city. The next slide, I'm just going to take a brief moment here to just make sure and talk through this. This is a proposed slide. At this point, there is a proposal that's before City Council. It'll be coming forward on October 12th, at which point we'll be presenting an IGA. Council can then make the decision whether they want to go forward on this approach or not. So therefore, this is not exactly what it is yet, but this is what is being proposed. And it breaks down the two groups. It's the City and County of Broomfield and the Broomfield Housing Authority and how we would work. And so that in that intergovernmental agreement, we'd be agreeing to provide certain funding to the Broomfield Housing Authority as an independent organization, which it is legally right now, but in a more formalistic way, it'll become more independent. And talking through what each would do. We're working on that IGA right now and hoping to have that, well, we will have that ready for the October 12th meeting, but that's where we are at. And so I don't have all the specifics, but this gives you a sense of it. I'm not going to go through it, but suffice it to say that they'll be doing, the Broomfield Housing Authority will be a bit more on the development side and the community outreach side, and then we'll also be able to possibly reach out and obtain additional funding. On the Broomfield side, we'll be receiving the HUD dollars, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development dollars, doing some of the work we've been doing through that, and then also focusing on compliance. Because again, when these units come forward in a development, they'll have a deed restriction, a affordability restriction in place for anywhere from 30 to 40 years. And so someone has to make sure that those units stay because there's a public interest in those units being available for others. So we'll work through that. This is a little bit of a hint, and you can go through this. You all have the packets or you can get them through the PDF online. But this was some analysis we did to just help everyone understand exactly where some of the costs are. And what you'll hear oftentimes, perhaps while you're out talking to folks, is Broomfield's an expensive place to develop. There is no doubt about that. We are an expensive place to develop, but quite frankly, so is the entire Front Range. Part of it is the land cost. Part of it is the entitlements. And what I mean by that is it's also providing the water and the sewer. And so as a housing developer, as a housing unit comes forward, whether it be a single family or multifamily, obviously a house isn't any good if you can't turn on a tap and get water coming out, and you can't do something with the refuge through the sewer system. And so those tap and license fees are really important. And they're expensive, but that's what gives you access into the system. So some other communities call them impact fees, and they have other names. Ours are relatively reasonable compared to other communities. They're roughly in the same vein, but you will hear developers oftentimes say, oh, between the price of the land and the license fee, it's really expensive. That's true everywhere in the Front Range. And I'm not suggesting they're not high or that they're not important numbers, but it shows you roughly where they fit. And then, of course, the cost of construction has risen because of the uncertainty through COVID of lumber, steel, cement, and other items, as well as if anybody's done a home improvement in the last few months, or last year and a half, I guess, really is the way I should phrase it. Doors are expensive, windows are expensive, hard to get, on the list goes. And so the supply chain has been disrupted and it's having an effect on housing. So that gives you that. On the right side of the slide, it just gives you the rough level of wages and what it means to be 80% AMI or 100% AMI. AMI, for those of you who don't know, is area median income. It's set for the entire metropolitan area at the same price. So AMI in Denver is the same as in Broomfield. Perhaps Broomfield is more expensive than some other communities and cheaper than others. So perhaps we're a little bit higher than, I don't know, Centennials, but we'll say Centennials, but lower than perhaps another community. But that gives you the area, and that's determined at the federal level and what that number looks like. It's determined annually. It's both set for rent and family income, and it's by the size of the family. So a 4-person, right now, the rough number in your mind should be 4-person household, 80% AMI, is $100,000 a year in earnings. That's the median income for those folks. Those of you who don't recall, median means that 50 plus 1, it is not the average. That actually skews to the right here in the metropolitan area. It's a higher level number. Next section, sir, I'm going right to your question now. I didn't forget, seriously. So there are 3 what we call catalytic developments here in Broomfield. This gives you a sense of where they are. I'm going to go through each one of them very briefly. One is up in the northeast side. It's referred to as Baseline. Formerly it was referred to as North Park.
Yes, sir. Sorry, actually, since we're moving into the earlier question, I'd like to just jump back a little bit because I would, and this could be just tell me where to go do my own research, but the idea of the 5.7 million cash in lieu, that's money, but is that a immediate and declining resource versus if it was actually units constructed? Does that make sense?
Yes. So it is paid upon time of building permit. So therefore, that's what we anticipate coming in because the permits are going to be issued this year. There are other commitments for some future projects. When they go to permit, that's when we receive that line. So our estimation on the 5.7 is based on what we think is going to be the developers coming in and ask for permits to be issued this year. So that's.
But I guess where my question is kind of coming from is I'm comparing it to tap fees and how over the 20, 30 year, whatever, once we're to build out, tap fee revenue is going to be a declining source of monies to the city and county, right? And it seems like this as well would be a declining source of or stream of revenue, correct?
It will be a varied degree of revenue. And the reason is it's difficult to forecast what that would be because first places, it tends to be larger development, whether it be a holistic development or whether it be a vertical development. And the other part, which we're going to talk about in a second, so I'm going to force you back to that future question that you had asked, and that is we expect an increasing amount of redevelopment occurring in Broomfield going forward. And so in some redevelopment, they may be making a cash in lieu payment for a change. And so it would be difficult to forecast what that revenue stream would necessarily look like because part of it is it's related to the cost of development and it's to the scale and type of development they want to have. And we can talk a little bit more about that, but I wish it were an easy A or B or yes or no. It's not, there's all kinds of variability within that potential revenue stream going forward.
Great, thank you.
You bet. And sorry, I can't be more specific. Sometimes there's that part of me that just wants to say the answer is 4 or whatever the number is, or 7, which Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was 4?
It was 42.
42, thank you. I knew Jake would know that.
He's around for a reason.
Tell you what, The second bullet point in the center is Broomfield Town Square, formerly known as the Civic Center project. It is the one, those of you who are in the council chambers, if we were to open up the windows, that's where the Civic Center, or otherwise known now as Broomfield Town Square, would be. It's between here and 120th. We include the Safeway property, the former Safeway property. And then the last one is up in the upper left corner, in the northwest portion of the city, is the Flatirons redevelopment, and I'll talk briefly about each of them. I have representative color cool pictures because, you know, nothing says something in 1,000 words or less than a picture, so this saves me 1,000 words. This is baseline, and I'll talk briefly about it in 2 more slides. But gives you some sense of the open space and the built structures and some degree of the density and height that we expect there. This is the Broomfield Town Square. And you can see it, this would be looking out from the back door of the Safeway, looking straight north toward where the library and the lake would be, and looking through the plaza area. And you can see where the lake, which is an enlarged lake, would be going in compared to where it is now. The lake on the right side of that picture is where roughly the current pond, or the lake that's over there now. And so you can see an enlargement of the lake showing up in that graphic. This is the reimagining and the redevelopment of the Flatirons Crossing. In the upper part, you can see the existing wall, which will stay in place. But what you see is in the yellow, blue, and green buildings, those are the structures that are coming on the south to southwest side, between where the mall entrance is, where the food court is, for those of you who are familiar with it, coming down to the AMC Theater. At the very toe, the very bottom of the slide, that's the AMC Theater that's sitting there. So you get a sense of that area. Those of you who've been over there recently have noticed that there's some vacancy in that area. So this is that. How do we enliven that development going forward? So those are my quick thumbnails. Now let's, here's the 3, and in your packet you have these details, so I'm not going to go into them in great depth, but baseline, roughly 6 million square feet of office and flex space, 9,000 housing units are expected, of which a little over 1,000, 1,059 will be affordable units, including then what's called the Central Park, Central Street area. It's going to be shopping and dining. There is expected to be a fair amount of trails, parks, and other networks, including the Big Lawn, a K-12 STEM school, as well as other private public facilities. As an example, the Butterfly Pavilion is expected to move from 104th and Westminster up to this site, and also adjust kind of what they're doing. So a little bit more of a science research center as opposed to the museum and the interactive pavilion that they have now. So even building on the science activities that are occurring there now, growing it much more. And right now there's roughly about 1,000 housing units up in that area, a little bit more now, as well as there is some commercial developments that already occurred and more is coming. There's a flex building getting ready for under construction now, as well as the ones that are already existing there. Broomfield Town Square, roughly 150,000 square feet of dining and shopping, as well as just under 800, well, it's actually 812 because of the for sale units, housing units. And then, of course, the real key feature to this is not, while that development is important and that shopping and dining is really important, more importantly is the ability to gather, linger, and just gather, and just to hang out and discover. And there'll be lots of art, there'll be plaza, there's a lake, it will tie into the library. So it's going to be a really exciting development. It's expected to break ground just over a year from now. It's taken a while to get here. But the Matrix team has really been focused on this. We had 2 meetings today on it. It's literally what we talk about almost every day in these developments. We expect that the buildings will start being open and the redevelopment of the Safeway will be occurring between 2024 and 2025. And the reason why I give you that range is what they're planning on doing is not having the first phase is a relatively significant phase. It will include 3 new buildings, as well as the redevelopment of Safeway. So it's a very robust. Some of that housing will come later on in that period, and some of the other activities will occur earlier. Flatirons Crossing, roughly 50,000 square feet of new space as well as some revitalized space, 300,000 square feet of new office and workspace on the location, a lodge, hospitality or hotel is expected, as well as roughly 650 multifamily housing units, including some affordability. That affordability is 80% AMI, 20% of those units. And so that's what will be coming into there. At the same time, the mall will stay. But this 18-hour development, if you will, you should be able to go over there and find exciting things to do as early as 6 a.m. and be there at midnight. And it will become much more of a robust center, both from a retail perspective, but also a live workplace. Very similar, perhaps at a different scale, but very similar to what you see at Cherry Creek as an example, between the mall and the Cherry Creek North development. So you see that kind of interaction between office and residential and retail and dining all in one space. And so that's what we see. The other part of it is, as you notice on the slide, there are 3 different types of development. It's new development, infill, and redevelopment. So that becomes really important for us. Moving along then, I just want to hit on this other aspect of the catalytic development. And I just realized I've been talking longer than I expected, so I apologize to that. The vitality development matrix, we've talked about that, and you'll hear more about that as we go forward, but this is a joint effort between community planning and community development planning and economic vitality. And what we're doing is just trying to think through what that development looks like going forward, as opposed to just more of the same. Not that that's not necessarily bad in some locations, but other parts of the community, we want to be able to say, this is where we want to stretch. So if we really want to bring multimodal transit, we have to encourage certain kinds of development in certain areas. That does not mean all across the city. It means where it's the right place at the right time, the right type of development. So you'll see that as really the bullet point number 2, if not here, where, if not this, what, if not now, when. And those become really important. So what the vitality matrix is about is not a prescriptive outcome, but an encouragement for a conversation. And that's really what's important, is to be able to say, don't just give us your old idea. Let's talk about where we're going forward together. So it really is a much more of a forward look rather than a yesterday look. And I don't mean to suggest that any of the development that is an older style development. I don't mean that in the least. What I mean is this community continues to evolve. It has evolved for the last 30 years, and we expect it to go forward. Last section, and I'll be quick about this because this is the one I know the best. And I mean that because this is what I've been doing for a long period of my career. We also, as mentioned earlier, we provide information to other departments, including the Department of Finance and CMO, and arguably the City Council to make decisions. And so as you think through on how you want to potentially, if you were elected, how you want to make decisions, sometimes it's really important to give you the current information as well as what we and other experts may be seeing coming forward. So that's what this is about. We keep track of certain information. We maintain those. I have been doing this for several decades. I won't go further than that. And have been doing forecasting expenditure analysis for a number of years. I also, though, don't feel that sometimes numbers tell you the true answer, and sometimes you have to understand graphically as well as other ways. So there's ways to convey and provide information. This is one example of that. This is the current population. It's actually about a year and a half old now, but nevertheless, this is a current breakdown of the population by generation. You've all heard about all these various generations, and you can say what you want about the millennials or the Gen Xers or the baby boomers. It doesn't matter which one you like the best. I'm not suggesting one is better than the other, but this gives you some sense. And what you'll notice is there has been, and there's an accompanying slide for this that I didn't bring today, but many of you have seen it. And that is the community of 1990 had a different mix of these, not these specific generations, but the representative generations of the time. You've seen our youth counts come down a little bit as a share of the population. we've actually seen the 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds rise as a share of the population. In all cases, our population is larger in every age group. But what you really see is that composite mix and the way that our community lays out is different than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And what we're seeing is that changes both the way that retailers and dining establishments look at us. It's also the way that we think about ourselves and the activities we need to have within a community. And so that slide tells a lot about what is going on in the community, especially when you compare it to yesterday versus today. And we'll continue to keep track of that. The key point is sometimes it's not a number that matters, it's about those distributions, how things look. I think some of you have seen some of the recent economic forecasts and updates provided on the financial and economic side. So some of these items you've already seen, so I'm not going to run through it. And that is there's an awful lot of conversation about what's happening in the economy, both at the local level and the national level. I have my sense of it from my experience in understanding this local economy as well as the national economy. So it just kind of runs through that. There are some things that are definitely impacting our economy going forward. Some things are structural and some things are transitory. But not everything is transitory, not everything is structural. As much as everybody wants to put it in a black or white box right now, the Federal Reserve Bank, not the way it really works in the economy. And I would say the chair himself would say it's not one or the other, but a little both. And so that just gives you some sense. And I apologize for the typo. I didn't mean to say retail and hospital demand. It's hospitality demand. That's on me. And as I said, my friends in communication did not review this ahead of time. So I'm not trying to forecast higher levels of hospital usage. That is not my role and is not my expertise in the least.
Shopping from hospital bed?
Yeah, no kidding. Although it's probably happening all over the place. Just so you have some quick facts, because somebody may say, you're running? How many people live here? Well, here's the current numbers. So this way you've got them. You can see what the census is. We are growing roughly 1,500 to 1,800 people a year here in Bloomfield. At the session on Friday, the question was asked, is that, what is that number? We see about 2,500 people move in on an annual basis and roughly 1,000 about. Generally speaking, the people in, this isn't perfect because every year is a little bit different, but generally when you look at it, what you see is many of the people moving to Bloomfield are coming from outside the metropolitan area and or certain magnet communities, and those magnet communities where I guess the reverse of discharge communities are Larimer County and Boulder County. Why? Because if you're a recent college graduate in Colorado, you are likely coming from one of those counties. And we do see those folks coming here for the jobs that are in interlocking counties. And so we see it coming from Texas and California and other places. When we see people leave Bloomfield, they're tending to go to other suburban parts of the metropolitan area. So we see people coming from Denver, Boulder, Larimer, and out of the state. We see people going to Adams County, Jefferson County, and elsewhere. So that suggests particular patterns. We also see that as they're moving to Bloomfield and then away from Bloomfield, household sizes grow during that period that they're here, i.e. they have children. That's how households usually grow. You either get married or you have children. And also incomes tend to rise because they come in here as an entry point and left. And that's what you can see in the NRS data. Let's see, I think this is my last slide, and I apologize for going a little bit longer than expected. So this is what I see. This is my outlook. I wouldn't call it forecast. There's a difference, and I'm very worried about certain language, especially in economics. So this is my outlook going forward. Again, we're growing at roughly 1,500 to 1,800 a year. We expect that to continue for the next few years. We expect that we're going to have roughly 41,000 employed residents next year. And as a side note, that means roughly a little bit higher than the nation and the state. But we have about 52% of our residents employed. Why that matters is it talks something about the age of our residents. We've actually gotten younger on an average over the last few years, but also, and it's just slightly like a 10th of a year, but But the other part is we're a highly productive community, which means we have resources, we have interest, and other things. I expect the unemployment rate to continue to fall slightly, and that will continue. Our business employment, which is different, and so let me just take a quick half second here to say, resident employment means people living here and where they may work somewhere, it doesn't matter where. Business employment are the businesses, how many people they employ. As oftentimes been cited by the former mayor as well as other people, we have roughly 15 to 20% of our population living and working in Broomfield, and the rest of the folks are either driving in, taking the bus in, biking out, whatever those mode choices that they have, but they're moving too. So we are very much a metropolitan community. We have a greater level of movement to the south than we do to the north now. So 20 years ago, we were very tied to the Boulder economy. Nowadays, we're much more tied to the metropolitan Denver economy. It doesn't mean that we've diminished our connection to Boulder. It's just, I guess it has diminished as a share, not necessarily in the quantity. So we're still very much tied both directions, but a little bit more leaning to the south these days. And I think you can see, as Brenda pointed out, roughly our retail sales tax forecast for next year. I'm happy to answer any of the questions. I did not go through a few items that we often talk about, but I wanted to be somewhat concise and take advantage of your time without, as one of my former bosses used to say to me, I asked you the time, not how to make the watch. So hopefully I gave you the time, not how to make the watch. So at that,
Ms. Romine, so going back to the community survey, one of the top priorities of residents was the right type of growth. Could you put some color on that for us?
I wish I could know. That's the problem sometimes with surveys, but I think what the community was talking about, as best we can tell from other surveys and other information, as you read deeper into it. And Abby, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 160 or 180 pages of content before you even get to the, here's what the survey looked like, here's the detailed labels. But very much what the community indicated in every survey that I've seen, so this is Advanced Broomfield, the last two community surveys, it's about we're very friendly, safe, family-oriented community. And so I would say some degree that it's reflective of that from the standpoint of jobs and employment. Oftentimes what we see cited, and we can see it later on, was hospitality, dining, jobs that match up with the types of residents we have here. So I think a lot of people would like to reduce their commute if they could find that opportunity for a localized job. But nevertheless, we actually are one of the stronger economies in the metropolitan area in the sense of a balance. So I think that's what I would suggest to you might be right development, but I can't necessarily go beyond that. And so sometimes the way that I define right development is by what the city and county manager tells me, and she hears that from what city council decides is the right kind of development. And hopefully the city council members are listening to the residents. So sometimes it is also that verbal and qualitative way that we hear what right might mean. I don't know if I was answer
No,
that.
thank you.
I wish I had, but
So, it says that looks like only 52% of our residents are employed. Does that mean the rest of them are retired or looking for work or going to college? Children?
so don't forget our residents start at the age of 0 and go to, I think there are potentially, although I guess I haven't heard specifically, I'm assuming there's definitely a lot of 90-year-olds and maybe some 100-year-olds, but you're that full range. So the way that people work is, of course, generally 16 to roughly 70, and so there's those tails on the other side. We have a relatively robust scale of population under 18 who are probably not working in some form. Although I try at my own house.
Sorry. So do you know the number of residents that are capable of working, that aren't working?
So our labor force is roughly, I want to say our labor force is around 43,000. So there's roughly about 1,500 people to 2,000 that are unemployed right now that are seeking work.
15,000, did you say?
About
Okay.
about 1,500 to 2,000. I can get that specific number. But there are folks that, one of the family members is, is gainfully employed and the other one has decided, as I keep trying with my wife, that I am happy to not work. If she could just provide for my mortgage payments and other things. But I would love to hang out with the dogs and pick up the kids at school and stuff. But that's what it amounts to. And honestly, in the state, I want to say it's about 47%. So we are significantly higher when you're 10% higher than the state. And that's a very robust number.
Good, thanks.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I have to then start telling jokes or tell you about what I watched. No, I'm just kidding. So seriously, for those of you who are watching either live or watch a recording of this, again, you can ask follow-up questions. The CMO crew at Broomfield.org. We're always happy to take those questions. And the reason why we do it isn't because I'm trying to duck out and I don't want you to know my email. You can easily find out my email and it's available. It's just that way we can make sure we're providing a positive answer in the sense of everybody getting it. During election season, I don't know a better way to phrase it, but during this period of time, all questions that we receive are then responded to the whole, so that we're not in any one-off conversations. We feel that that's the best way, whether they be an incumbent or a non-incumbent, to respond to questions. So any election question or any question that's deemed to be that's how we respond. So that that's part of the reason why we're asking you to send those email questions to CMO crew, just to make sure we're sharing the bounty of our knowledge and experience. So at that, Abby, you want any final comments? I will mention while she's walking up here that Wednesday, 3 o'clock, the third of these simulating, exciting, fun-filled events will be Anna will be here live on stage for your viewing pleasure, but 3 to 4:30, and that will be these three departments. And there is no reason why we took it in this order. It made logical sense. One leads to the other, back and forth. So.
Yeah, so you stole my thunder. I was just going to say Amber and Zeddy and Katie Allen, our city and county engineer, will be with Anna as well in case there's some questions on CIP or capital improvement projects. I did just want to echo what Jeff said. So far, the budget forum and the economic vitality forum, the presentations are up so people can review them. I believe they're on the broomfieldvoice.com, or you can go to the candidate information page and find those. I do know that the recording is up for the budget forum, and this one will come shortly after. So anybody that didn't get to see it, we'll obviously have that so folks can rewatch, because Jeff is entertaining. I don't know many entertaining economists, but Jeff is one of them. So thank you, Jeff, and thanks, Matt and Jeff, the other Jeff number 2, for being here, and thank you all for joining us. So wish everybody a great Monday.
Yeah.